Right. Give us a testing.
Testing.
Okay. And action, you like.
Okay. Can I move the cursor now?
Well, first of all, if you just give a quick introduction to yourself, so you're on screen now, and
Okay.
then I'll flick you over to the presentation.
Right, thank you. Hello everybody, my name's Cath and I'm an agricultural advisor with the Rivers team at the Wildlife Trust here in Shropshire, and I'm going to be explaining to you why on earth an agricultural advisor works for the Rivers team. The other thing I need to explain on this screen also is why there's a Severn Trent logo there. That's because I work as part of a partnership with Severn Trent, and because a lot of these slides are theirs, I really did think I ought to credit them. Okay, so we work in catchments in here. So we have the Shropshire Middle Severn, which is the pink area at the top. Now, to explain, a catchment is an area where all the rain that falls on that area works its way to particular rivers. So the pink area, which is the River Roden and the River Tern, which end up in the Severn just by Attingham. We also work in the Middle Severn catchment, and that's my colleague Dave, and that is just the River Severn with the tributaries running directly into it. And then my other colleague Kate, she works in the team, which is the green area at the bottom, and that works its way down to Worcester and joins the Severn at Worcester. And we also have a colleague who works with the Severn Rivers Trust, who works in the Cound catchment, which is the blue area. To explain the smaller, what are called sub-catchments, those are areas where it will drain into a particular river. So if you look at the big pink blob at the top, the bits in the bottom right hand corner, that small area, that everything that lands, all the rain that lands on that area ends up in Aqualake Mere ultimately. So farming and water, what most people think of is irrigation, so that's watering crops and keeping livestock watered, and this can come from the river. If a farmer is going to take out or abstract more than 20 cubic metres a day, he has to apply for a licence from the Environment Agency, and if the levels in the river get too low, then they will be notified by the Environment Agency that they need to stop abstracting water, which can obviously in dry weather be very problematical for them. So the problems for farming by a watercourse are if you are spraying pesticides or you are distributing fertiliser or muck, that has the chance to run off the ground and straight into a watercourse, or it can percolate through the soil into land drains, which will drain into a watercourse, or it can go down into the groundwater. Other problems are sediments getting into the river. Again, that will run straight off the land, or it'll go through land drains. And so 25% of phosphates that are found in rivers, this is DEFRA figures, are attributable to agriculture. The other 75% can be other reasons, like phosphates from sewage treatment works, which mostly come from our washing machines. And I had to make some notes to remember. Oh yeah, garden fertiliser is another one. 50% of nitrates are attributable to agriculture. The other 50% will come from rotting vegetation, rubbish dumps, places like that. and then 75% of sediment that's found in our rivers comes from agriculture. The rest of it will come from construction and quarries that pump water into rivers. And particularly here in Shropshire, the water that we drink, some of it comes from the River Severn. So there are water treatment works at Shelton in Shrewsbury, and there's another one at Trimpley, which is just south of Bridgnorth. So another problem for farming by watercourse is access to drinking water and your animals. So if you've got sheep or cattle that need to drink, if you've got a field by a river, it's a very easy option to just let the animals use the river for drinking water. The problem with this is, as you can see in this photo, as they move in and out of the water, they erode the bank, which means that vegetation can't take a hold, so there's no refuge for smaller mammals, invertebrates, amphibians. By taking the soil into the water, that means that there's then sediment and sludge in the bottom of the river. Associated with the soil will be phosphates, and also when an animal is in the water, it almost inevitably will pee or poo, which means that's adding more nitrates and more phosphates to the water. And also the other thing to think about is that if an animal has been wormed, the chemicals that are used for worming go straight through the animal and are still active. So as they come out in the poo, then any nematode worms, flatworms, roundworms in the river are going to be killed. There were some new rules that came out, so these are farming rules for water that came out a couple of years ago. So now farmers have to demonstrate that they are making their best attempts to stop livestock accessing a river. Sadly, if a farmer's got miles and miles of riverside, it's very, very expensive to fence it. You've also then got to supply water to those fields, which means you've got to have water pipes, you've got to have pumps, you've got to have troughs. If there's no electricity, those pumps might have solar panels, and it all starts to get very expensive. So particularly in the River Severn, the pesticides that are found there, and this is done by Severn Trent analysing the water, they talk to agronomists who are advisors to the farming community, and they get an idea of what's going to be used quite a lot in any season. And then we and the Severn Trent advisor go and sample the water, and that will get tested for various pesticides. So the ones that particularly are found in the River Severn, so there's those herbicides there. Those herbicides are generally to fight weeds in grassland or to fight weeds, particularly on fields where there might be oilseed rape that's been drilled. The biggest one we have a problem with by a long way is Metaldehyde. So Metaldehyde is a molluscicide. A mollusk is an animal with a shell. Now, believe it or not, slugs have got shells, they're just inside. So this works against slugs, it works against snails, it works against bivalves, so freshwater mussels, peacockles, things like that. So that's found in the water, and it's a real problem for the water company because it's extremely difficult and extremely expensive to get out of the water. And then insecticides that have been found have been those that are associated with sheep dip. Why there would be sheep dip found in the River Severn, I've got no idea. Maybe it's that sheep were wet and have been left to drip on a field and it's run off the field. So why is all of this a problem for the wildlife? So any sediment or soil that gets into the bottom of the river, instead of it being a lovely pebbly or gravelly bottom, it becomes a sludgy, what would be called anoxic, which is no oxygen environment, so nothing can breathe. It produces hydrogen sulfide that smells. I've sampled rivers like this. Believe me, nothing lives in it. all the invertebrates are smothered, and the invertebrates are the bottom of the food chain, so anything else that feeds off the invertebrates goes as well. Nitrates and phosphates, what happens with those is, generally at low levels everything ticks along okay, but if the levels get too high, then algae, which are single-celled plants, have a party and think woohoo, and grow really fast. They take all the oxygen out of the water, and it leaves nothing for the invertebrates, the amphibians, and everything else, the fish that live there. Pesticides that are found in the water, even at permitted levels. Now, permitted levels are very, very low, so these are 1 part per billion, and that level is set because that's the level where they can be detected to. Anything lower than that, it wouldn't make any difference because you couldn't find it in the lab. But all these mixture of different insecticides, pesticides, herbicides, molluscicides will have what are called cocktail effects. So for all the things that live in the water, it affects their immune system. So it makes them very susceptible to any changes that might happen in the river, and they just become more easily killed. So what do we do to help? Now, I need to point out all of this is funded by Severn Trent, because what Severn Trent have realised is that it's actually cheaper to work with the farming community directly than it is to try and sort the problem out at the treatment works. So for every £1 that is spent working with farmers in a catchment, £20 or up to £20 can be saved in treatment costs. So these sort of schemes are very, very popular with water companies. So the first thing that we help with is we offer pesticide application training. So anybody that is spraying with a big boom sprayer, anybody who's spreading granules, that would be fertiliser or slug pellets, or anybody who is knapsack spraying, so that's a spray that you would have on your back with a wand and you would just take out individual weeds. You can have training, and Severn Trent will pay for that for you. There is also something called the Farm to Tap Metaldehyde Reduction Scheme. So this is a scheme where farmers are paid to either not use metaldehyde or use different techniques to discourage slugs, or to change to another more water-friendly chemical. That's really, really popular in the catchment where I work. We've now got 90% of farmers now that are signed up to that. It's really popular, and we help them with the paperwork, because the one thing that farmers haven't got a lot of is time. So to get them to join these schemes, you have to help them. Another scheme that's very popular is the Severn Trent Environmental Protection Scheme, or STEPS. So this offers grant money to help them with things like fencing or a pesticide handling area. And again, we help them with the application and we help them with any paperwork. Also, once a year, Severn Trent will have a pesticide amnesty. So any pesticides that have gone what is called off-label, so you can no longer use them, or they've gone out of date, to make sure that the farmer doesn't either just keep using them, or pours them down the drain, or does something else that they shouldn't be doing with them. Severn Trent will actually pay for a certain amount to be taken away and disposed of properly. And the other thing that we organise are what are called specialist on-farm advice, which we call SOFA. So that is a bespoke visit by an expert in, say, how water moves around a farmyard. So an advisor would turn up and would look around the farm and can tell the farmer where his problem areas are, where he might be in breach of any legislation. And also the report that comes from those helps us to inform any STEPS applications, so that if it's been highlighted that they need to do such and such piece of work, then we can help the farmer to sort that out. Just a note on household pesticides, particularly slug pellets. You can buy metaldehyde slug pellets up until the end of this year. then you have to have them used up by the end of next year, after which time you are not allowed to use them. If you have got a bottle of Metaldehyde slug pellets at the back of your shed, the best thing to do, or any pesticides that you want to get rid of, if you take them to your local household recycling centre, they've got a special place for pesticides and can get rid of it properly for you. So some of the things that we've achieved, this is a couple of weeks old now actually, so it'll be more than this. So far we've got 329 farmers signed up to the Metaldehyde reduction scheme, and over the 4 or 5 years that this scheme's been running, the Metaldehyde levels in the team have reduced by 54%. The Metaldehyde levels in Shropshire Middle Severn and the Middle Severn have reduced by a whopping 74%, so we're all very proud of that. The 40 to 90% reduction in pesticides as a whole, I know that's a very broad spectrum. It's because some assumptions are made about how pesticides are used. So it's, you're comparing best practice with worst practice, so the real figure is somewhere in between. And then this year, which has been the most popular year, although last year was very good as well, we've had 160 farms signed up to the STEP scheme. So that's funded things like, on the left hand side there, that's a sediment trap, so that's catching water running off a field, and which is collecting all the soil that is eroding, which has got phosphates associated with it, and the farmer can take that out and reapply it to his field. We've got some electric fencing, so this is the farm where the sheep were against the river. That's all now fenced off so that the riverbank's now got a chance to survive, get going again. The complicated 3-tier thing on the right hand side, that's a biofilter. So a farmer will have a dedicated shed where he keeps his sprayer. The sprayer will be washed out occasionally, be washed out on the outside, it'll be filled in there, and the problem with pesticides is they are concentrated and have to be diluted. So any drips of concentrated pesticide that were in the environment can be extremely problematical. So here everything's collected and will run through the biofilter, which is just basically 3 IBCs full of straw and soil, and the soil bacteria in those 3 IBCs just slowly break down the pesticides, and the water comes out the bottom. Should be clean. On the bottom left hand corner of that picture is of some cover crops. So cover crops are great because they do a whole host of things. They keep soil in place over the winter, whereas otherwise it would have been bare ground. They contain plants that will take nitrogen out of the air and put it into the soil, which means there's less need for fertiliser. And also in the spring they can be incorporated into the soil, which increases the soil organic matter, which means that the soil will hold more water, also means that it's less prone to erosion and all the problems that are associated with that. And then on the bottom right hand side there's a tractor with a GPS receiver on the cab, and then there's the screen that's inside the cab. So this is what we call precision equipment. Precision equipment means that farmer has a very accurate position of his tractor where he has applied pesticides or fertiliser, means that areas that aren't cropped don't get covered in chemicals, you don't get overlaps or double dosing. It just means there's less chemical on the field, there's less chance of that chemical then getting into the watercourse. So some of the things that you can do, because we are all sadly guilty, it's not farmers' faults, they're working really hard to produce cheap food for us, and the problem is we want cheap food. So it's driven, supermarkets drive the price down of things, which mean that farmers have to have economy of scale, which means they are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, means that fields are bigger, means that equipment is bigger, it means that the farmer isn't as able to monitor each individual field. They can't particularly look at a field and have a wander around and think, yeah, there's no slugs in here, we're okay, we don't need to put any slug pellets down. It tends to be, well, we'll put slug pellets down just in case. So I know it's not an affordable option for many people, but if you can, please support your local food producers and your smaller farmers, because they really do struggle. If you have to use slug pellets or fertilisers, please use them very carefully. If you can find alternatives, that would be great. There's an image there at the bottom of somebody who's used some eggshells to deter slugs. Coffee grounds are another one. I would ask you, please do not put slug pellets near a drain of any type, because the drain will be attached to either a surface water drain or a sewage drain. So the surface water drain is what's coming off your roof. It's clean water essentially that will either go into a soakaway or it will go into the river or the nearest brook. So if you put slug pellets down it, and it only takes one slug pellet to be, massively over the permitted levels. I know people don't know this, and I'm not pointing fingers. It's just the way it is. If it's around a sewage drain again, it's then going to go through the sewage treatment works. It might not necessarily get taken out, and will go into the river. And if we've had a storm surge, which means that the sewage treatment works get overflowed, that they just go straight into the river. Misconnections, I'll mention this because it is still river pollution. So misconnections are when houses maybe have an extension or even can be built and are connected to the wrong type of drain. So before, when I explained about surface water drains and sewage drains, if you say you've had an extension and you plumb in your washing machine, and then you get the discharge to go into your surface water drain, that surface water drain goes straight to your nearest watercourse. It's full of washing powder, which is full of phosphates. Other misconnections can include toilets, and when we've been litter picking down the River Severn, you find very obviously where misconnections are, because down at the bottom there is wasn't picked by us. You find sanitary products, unfortunately, all entangled in the vegetation that's got plastics in it, which will then get into the river. You might not even know it's happening, but I'm telling you now. And then the other plea is, please could you speak to your MP about your concerns about climate change and your concerns about environmental standards, and making sure that the environmental standards that we have in farming now are kept when we leave the EU, or even enhanced. Interestingly, my local MP, Mark Pritchard, he publishes examples of what questions he gets asked each month, and by far the biggest number of enquiries he gets are to do with agriculture and the environment. And specifically with climate change, farmers are finding it really difficult now because the weather is swinging from one to the other. So we now have huge amounts of rain that just go on and on and on and on, and all the associated soil erosion and everything that goes with it, and then it goes dry and everything bakes hard, and then we get another bout of rain and now the soil is hard, and it's just a big problem. So that's a bit of a plea from me for you to do that. If you would, that'd be great. So that's me. Thank you for watching. If you've got any questions, you can ask our comms team. If you'd rather email me, there's my email address there. Next week it will be Robin Major who'll be talking about the North West Relief Road and all the environmental impacts of that. If you want to become a member, or you want to donate, or anything that you're interested in with Shropshire Wildlife Trust, that's the website there. And then just a final plea, if you do spot any pollution incidents, if you ring that hotline number, that's the Environment Agency, And if it's a really big problem, I'd ring them again, because it will just push the, they'll just notice it more if you've rung them twice. So we've got a question. How do I find farmers willing to cooperate? Well, I'm their best friend because I'm giving them money. I'm not giving them money. They do have to contribute. So I'm helping them with money. And I can't say as I've ever come across anybody who isn't willing to do something. They get a bit of a bad rap, farmers, and I'm going to defend them, because generally they're just doing their best under very difficult circumstances. Have we got any more questions? That question was from Leanne, by the way, who's somebody I know. So hello, Leanne. Nice. Good evening to you.
I don't think we've got any more questions.
No, that's it. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Okay.